This is one very sweet memory that some brahmacharis told me about Srila Prabhupada in Delhi. They said that Srila Prabhupada, he used to come to Delhi a lot when he was trying to print the Srimad Bhagavatams. Oh, remind me to tell that other story about the Sanskrit scholars and the Bhagavatams. So he said that Srila Prabhupada was so determined, no one had ever seen such determination. He would go on the train in the morning in the boiling hot. He would do all this canvassing to try and find enough paper just to do a few chapters of the book. He would go around to all these different civic organizations and different kinds of Arya Samajams, and he would ask people to help him in his mission, that his Gurudev had ordered him to go to the West and to print these books in English. So he would do like this, just, he had his own program and his own plan, and he did it all the time, very, very deeply. So he said that one day he was walking in the hot sun, in the Delhi sun in the summer, and he said that he walked by, he was on his way to buy some things in the market, and he saw Srila Prabhupada. He was on a rickshaw, yeah, but he saw Srila Prabhupada standing by the gate of one very rich household. And so he kind of stopped and he said, what are you doing here? What are you standing here for? It's hot. And Prabhupada said, yes. He says, but I am waiting for one gentleman to come. He has promised me one donation for my books. And he said, oh, well, why don't you come back later in the evening or something? It's so hot. I don't know how you can stand here. And Prabhupada said, no, it's all right. Go ahead. Go on. I will do well. So he said, well, couldn't I give you some donation instead? Because he felt so bad. And he said, could I give you some donation? And Prabhupada said, how much? And he said, well, how much are you going to get from this donor? And he said, he has promised me 5 rupees. And then he said, all right, I will give you 10 rupees. And then Prabhupada said, that's very nice. Will you give it every month? And he said, yes, all right, I'll give it every month, but don't stand here in the heat. And Prabhupada said, no, you go do your things on the thing. I'll just wait a little while longer. So when he came back a little later, still the man hadn't come, and Prabhupada was standing at the gate. And he said, please, Swami Maharaj, please don't stand there at that gate. What else do you need? And he said he noticed that Srila Prabhupada, his dhoti was torn, and he was just, oblivious of those kinds of things, and he was carrying this big stack of this heavy paper and stuff, all of his manuscript forms. And he said, well, all right, I'll buy you a new dhoti and a shirt, a kurta. And Prabhupada said, all right. And he said, you come back with us. And Prabhupada said, no, I won't come back. I have my place at Chippiwada. He goes, I'm very, very busy. He goes, but thank you very much. So he said that he had never seen that much determination and sense of humor and joy. Even though Srila Prabhupada looked like he had so many obstacles, he was very blissful, and he was just seeing his Gurudev's path for him, and he was following that very strongly. And another sweet story like that I heard from one old Vaishnava who was a Sanskrit scholar, and he said at that time, across the street from Prabhupada's temple, the Krishna Balaram Mandir, there was a Sanskrit and philosophy school that was run by one of Prabhupada's godbrothers. So in those days, a lot of the devotees were writing literatures, and they used to get together and they'd have like a writer's kind of support group where they would bring their Sanskrit and bring what they were writing and help each other if they had any kind of questions, technical things and things like that. So they said that Srila Prabhupada used to come all the time, and he would bring his manuscripts and he would read them in English, and very few of them even spoke English, but he wanted some help sometimes with the Sanskrit. And so he said that they weren't very keen, none of them, because they were high-class Brahmins, were very keen on anybody, let alone Srila Prabhupada, going across the ocean to the West, because it was considered a contamination. So by Hindu law, you don't do it, or you lose your caste, or whatever else you lose. So Srila Prabhupada knew that, but at the same time, when he finally finished his 3rd canto, he brought a copy of each third volume of the 1st canto, right? He brought each of those red books with him to one of the meetings, and he said, so, look here, look what I have. He said, this is the first three books of my Srimad Bhagavatam that I'm translating, and these books, they were ordered by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and my Guru Maharaj that they had to go across the ocean and be an enlightenment to the Western people. These books have already been ordered to go there. So I was hoping that you would all give your blessings for these books. So he said, you will all give. So they all said, all right. So Prabhupada very delicately passed around each of the 3 books and asked each one of them to touch it and put it on his head and give a blessing. So they all kind of did like that. And then Srila Prabhupada said, oh, thank you very, very much for blessing these books. But he goes, now I am wondering, these books, they are going to go across the ocean, but they need someone to take them. They can't just go by themselves, and they need someone to explain them and distribute them and tell people about them. It can't be done without someone. So I'm that person who wants to go. So I'm asking you if you will also give me your blessing that I can take these books, that I can accompany these books to America. So then, against their will, they all gave big blessings to Srila Prabhupada. So he remembered that, and he said those were the best blessings that he ever got to give. And he felt like it was some great mercy upon him that he got 1 inch of a chance to help in Prabhupada's mission. A man named Dr. Verma, and he lived with Srila Prabhupada for a certain period of time. He was a doctor, and his spiritual master was one of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers that Prabhupada had some difficulties with. And at one time, Srila Prabhupada wanted to build a temple at Mayapur for the Westerners. And this devotee was in charge of the Gaudiya Math at that time, and he wanted to give it to him, but it was complicated, and he didn't want to, Prabhupada wanted it on special transcendental terms because he knew how big it was going to get and everything. So this man said he was his secretary at that time, and so Srila Prabhupada used to come on several occasions to talk to his guru. And he said they would go in the room and they would close the door and lock it, and they wouldn't let him come in, and then he would hear some kind of, raised voices coming from there. But when they came out, Srila Prabhupada was always very respectful and pay obeisances like that, and he'd say, oh, your Gurudev is very nice, and then he would leave. So he said that he developed an attachment for Srila Prabhupada, and at one point when Srila Prabhupada was building Vrindavan, remember Srila Prabhupada's house was there, and he got this sudden inspiration that he wanted to give a donation to Srila Prabhupada for his preaching. So Srila Prabhupada actually invited him to come and stay with him in his rooms. And not only him, but his wife as well, because he came along with his wife. And their kids, I guess, were grown up and in school. So he said that we lived there for several months, just with Srila Prabhupada. He had the main room, and he gave us that side room that's now the library. He said, so we were staying there, and he said he always encouraged me to chant 64 rounds. He said Prabhupada himself always chanted 64 rounds. And I said, well, we never heard that. And he said, oh, I saw it. I would look every morning and see his beads going down. And then you know how the extra 4 are there, so then one goes down, that's 16, the next is 32, like that. So he said, I always watched. He said, because he would encourage me, now you do also. And he'd say, I can't do, I'm a doctor. But anyway, he said that at one point he got so inspired, and he said, Prabhupada, I have some savings of some, I don't know what it was. I think at that time it was 25,000 rupees, which was a lot in those days. So he said, I want to give this all to you. And so Prabhupada said, oh, that is very nice. We have so many uses for this. It's wonderful. You can give. So he said he just did it with his hand and gave it to Prabhupada. But then when he went back to his room that night, he told his wife, he was all enthusiastic, oh, I gave all this Lakshmi to Srila Prabhupada. And she went, what? That was the Lakshmi that was for our children's education. And, that was the Lakshmi for, the family house that we needed to work on and stuff. And he said, well, I already gave it into Prabhupada's hands. And she said, no, you should ask him. I can't bear this. I feel like I'll die. And so Srila Prabhupada, so then he went with his wife to see Srila Prabhupada, and then he very humbly said, well, Srila Prabhupada, I gave you that Lakshmi, but my wife is in distress. And what should I do? And so Srila Prabhupada immediately looked to his wife and he said, oh, you are in distress? And she kind of went, well, I don't know. And Prabhupada said, but you must need this Lakshmi for your family and for your children's future and your home. And And she said as she started looking at Srila Prabhupada, she realized that she wasn't in distress, and she said, no, it's all right. It's all right, you just keep it. You please keep it. And then her husband said, actually, if we give like this to Srila Prabhupada, then all the good things will happen to us more better even, from a different angle. And our spiritual life will bloom. So then Srila Prabhupada said, oh, as you like, whatever you like, it's very good. So they kept that Lakshmi with Srila Prabhupada, and they said their life was very wonderful.